Sugar and Jeff back.
Hello.
Just like, oh my god. This is a random hesitation, and I was like, it's okay.
Greetings and salutations, lovelies.
Lovelies. So, we stopped off at my number 7. Jeff was telling us how his was number 2.
Cowboy Bebop was number 2.
For him. So, we'll go to your number 7.
My number 7 is a bit of an oddity for me because it is somewhat slice of life, and it's also sports related, which I haven't watched a lot of sports anime before, but I definitely loved Yuri on Ice.
Woo! Nice.
Nice.
Yuri on Ice went as I believe I have it as number 5 for me.
Okay, so you're a little bit higher than I do. So yeah, Yuri on Ice. Again, our wizard friend has made it aware to us because neither of us have watched a lot of sport anime. It's one of those...
I've watched a bit, but I definitely wouldn't say a lot, no.
Yeah. And so he made it aware to us that a lot of the conventions that Yuri on Ice uses is fairly normal for the genre because he's watched a lot of sports anime.
I don't care.
That being said, I absolutely adored Yuri on Ice. First of all, and I don't think you can understate how good the music is.
Oh, so good. I have it playing all the time. The soundtrack itself I have on all the time in our place. And I love it so much. Mm-hmm. Hearing people play it on the piano, having like a live band, having all of that kind of charisma with it is so beautiful. And I find that especially the piano tongue twisters, the piano pieces that they have with some of the really heartfelt routines really gets you into it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And you're like, oh my god, can he place? Like, I really care for this character. Will he do well? Is this where he chokes? Like, you're like, there's so much at stake here, and I know it's not real, but it's just like watching real figure skating where you're like, okay, I'm invested now. I hope they do well. Mm-hmm. And I love it so much. I could talk about it all day long. I had, obviously, my very first video on this channel was about Yuri on Ice and why you should be watching it.
If you haven't, why aren't you watching? You better watch. You better watch. You better do
it. Oh my god, it's creepy. Anyways, Yuri on Ice is really good. I've said it before. I've said it a million times in different places. If you can see the forest from the trees, like, yes, there are some moments with sexuality and relationships and kind of a nudity. I was just thinking, I was like, yeah, nudity.
But I mean, they're athletes. They shouldn't be.
But it's about kind of each character's kind of personality, their development, and it's very funny and sweet, and I find a lot of people right away are like, oh, it's yaoi, it's crap. And it's definitely not yaoi.
Oh,
and I feel like a lot of people didn't give the story a chance, which I really liked. And I find, which I complained about in one of our other podcasts, I think the most recent one, where, like, for example, Welcome to the Ballroom bitches out and does not go through the motions of showing just how much effort goes into these sports, or how much goes into being athletically fit, and what training you have to go through, and just the motion of watching them turn on the ice. Like, you see it in person, and then watching somebody draw it is amazing in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, they took the time to actually have real figure skaters.
Yes. That people like come in, like, what doesn't look right? Would that be possible? Would this, like, what made sense? And it just shows that there was care taken in this anime, whereas Welcome to the Ballroom, it's just kind of it doesn't go into the depth of showing you how the fluidity of the dance looks. It's just like, oh yeah, it's great, you'll love it, just don't worry about it, you'll love it. Whereas Yuri on Ice, it just shows everything where you have these younger people that have a lot of talent that can sometimes get in their own way, where they just have to have somebody who believes in you. And I was telling Jeff, one of the greatest things that happened during the time when this was airing, I was at, and it's probably one of my favorite anime-related moments ever, like, also, like, including cons and stuff that I've been to, was I was at a grocery store singing the intro song, and somebody just randomly started singing along with me, and it was probably the most like cheerful thing I've ever seen somebody else do. That was like, you did not know. Like, it was just the most wonderful thing, having this community of just happiness around this whole idea and this concept. It's just, yeah. It makes me so happy. Like, even the other day I mentioned I wasn't feeling well, and so I put it on, and it instantly, I was like, oh yeah, like, this feels good. This is what so many other anime should be looking at for inspiration of what it did right. Even if you don't fully like it, it has so many things working for it. The artwork, the music, the intros, like everything, like it just works.
And I think I mentioned it before that specifically for me, I like that you kind of cheer for everybody.
Yeah.
Even people who there's no real antagonist. There isn't somebody that you're not hoping for, that you're not rooting for, even though you realize only 3 people can place, but you want all of them to. You're my king, JJ.
And even his music was wonderful. Like, and he's not written in a way where you're meant to hate him. It's just somebody who has an ego, and he has the talent to back it up. And you're like, well, it's like Gordon Ramsay. You're like, well, I can't knock him. Like, if he can deliver, good for you.
I mean, it's even the I like, and I don't think I mentioned this before. I like what it has to say about having idols and having heroes, and what that does to you, not just on like a level of athletics, but just in general, where I felt like a lot of the series was focused on this idea that our main protagonist, our main Yuri,
not Yurio,
our main Yuri was so dead set on the idea that he was never going to be as good as his hero, that he couldn't get out of his own head. And it's just so good in that sense of looking into the idea of sometimes we are blinded by our own hero worship, that we don't see the good in ourselves.
Right.
We look to people who are betters, and then we immediately discount ourselves.
Right.
And the series did a really good job of doing that, of looking at characters who basically will beat themselves up because essentially they're not, in this case, the greatest skater who has ever lived.
I don't know what ever lived, but definitely from Russia.
The way in which they present him,
yes, it's
definitely,
like
he's the best of his generation. He is
a big
He's
deal.
a Mike Tyson. He is. He's a Michael Jordan. He's a LeBron James.
Yes,
he's a
but
Wayne
as you
Gretzky.
see from like figure skating, Elvis Stoiko was the king in Canada, and then you go to different competitions and you find out there's other people who are hot shit too. So, well, we'll see as the next season comes along. But either way, he's a big deal.
Yes.
And other people obviously look up to him.
It's beautifully crafted musically. It's beautifully crafted in the sense of storytelling progression. It is beautifully crafted in showing what friendship and rivalry and camaraderie exists within sport. It looks beautiful. It's I can't really say any sort of negatives about it, with exception to the fact that it sometimes leans a little too heavily on the goofy interactions between male characters, which it doesn't bother me at all. I'm an ally. I am definitely don't have any problems.
And by ally, Jeff means to the LGBTQ community. That's what he means by ally.
But relegating a lot of female characters into simply being fangirls kind of bothered me. And that's there. And then there was one character who wasn't necessarily a fangirl, who was, Yuri's friend for a long time. But they didn't really explore that very well.
I feel like they did explore some of it, where there are girls that are in his life that have helped him get to the point where he's been. And then, of course, I think it's obviously poking fun of the idea of how many girls will be watching this show and kind of the fan base of figure skaters in
it's
itself.
very meta.
I don't feel like it demeans women by any means.
No, but I feel it misses that a strong female character. That's all.
I feel like we do get strong female characters, especially out of Minako. She's the one who's the dancer, and we find that she herself has a lot of skill and potential, and she helps Yuri as well. I find she's a very strong character. I feel like, obviously, she needs more development, but I feel like it's already implied that she is a strong character. That's my own interpretation, though. But.
Yeah, I gave it a 9 as opposed to a 10, and that would be one of the very few reasons why, is that I just feel that a lot of the female characters who are written in purely as meta commentary on what you're expecting from the anime, from its explanations and what it does. So
my last thought is that it has a lot of self-awareness.
Yes,
it definitely kind of pokes fun at itself and says comments that definitely show that it's aware of what it's doing. Anyways, what's your number 6?
Yes, we're on to number 6. My number 6 is pretty much the last slice of life that you're going to see on my list. It is...
I have 2 guesses, but I'll let you tell me.
Your Lie in April.
That's what I was like, that's one of the ones I expected. And that's actually one of the ones I had in my honorable mention category.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Your Lie in April, it hit really well for me in the sense that, again, I've mentioned it before, that anime in a lot of ways is escapism for me.
And I told you it was like labeled as a shonen, and then we had that long talk about it.
Yeah. I want to see and even vicariously experience something that I never will in my lifetime. So a slice of life has to do something like that for me to be invested, especially for an anime series. A 2-hour movie, okay, that it's like any movie, but if you're wanting me to do 5, 6, 7 hours, it has to bring something to the table that I won't ever experience in my life, most likely. Your Lie in April does that really well. First of all, and I cannot stress enough how important it is that the music is probably the most beautiful music I've ever heard in an anime.
Right.
Period. Full stop. I could say that there are things in Cowboy Bebop that I liked better because I tend to, it's one of the few jazzy things I've ever listened to that I've been like, damn, like this has got like everything about it is excellent. It's classical music through and through with Your Lie in April, and it is absolutely gorgeous.
Right.
Unless you just have no appreciation for classical music, and there are people out there who do not like classical music, I don't know how you could watch this and not fall in love with just the music.
Right.
And the story is about musicians. It's about not just the music that's involved. It's about the characters and the people who create that music. And I think a lot of times in our lives in general, we forget about the fact that all of this music has to be created and, performed in some way, shape, and form. Of course, our current music system and what's in the top 10s and all that sort of stuff is a little different, and a lot of that is made in computers, and we don't know if the person who is credited as singing is really singing or if it's edited by a computer and all this sort of stuff. So it's really nice to just go back to classical music and understand that while they didn't necessarily write this music, though a lot of times the characters did write the music, they are performing it, and it's just 100%. Every piece of what they are at that particular point in their life is going into this performance.
Right.
And, the story that they tell just beyond...
No spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The story that they tell about these characters is important in understanding why the music is as strong as it is. It's, at its heart, it's just a story about characters and the incredible life that they've had to live, and it made me cry, which
yes, I can honestly say I think everybody who
wizard
had
friend
watched
cried.
it, yes, Well, it
Sugar
will make
cried.
you cry. Oh, it made me ugly cry. There's like one teardrop cry and then the ugly cry. And I found a hard time not ugly crying. I had one of its moments on my top 10 sad moments. I won't get into the reason why, but I find the art is beautiful. I find the characters very likable, and even ones that are flawed are also likable. I find, I don't remember what I just said, but the art itself is very soft and kind of light colors are pastels. We see a lot of fragility with these characters. We see kind of a very simplistic lifestyle, but these people and these characters and these personalities all stem from a very difficult place, each one of them in their own way. And we kind of understand where they got to where they are because of their past, and how their future can look different if they separate themselves from their past. And how sometimes the past kind of catches up with you. And I don't want to talk about it anymore because it's going to make me cry. But it's really, really great. The music, like Jeff was saying, a lot of classical music. We have a lot of people who kind of wing it, which is what he means by kind of playing it themselves. So it's kind of playing a classical song, but with their own flair. So you have that kind of personalization. But it's a very sweet story, and it's very, very touching. And I think most people could agree that it's very, very good. And it had a lot of buzz when it hit its peak. So I'm pretty sure almost everybody knows what it is, even by hearing it. But that's definitely understandable.
It definitely is. And I love one of the strongest things about it is, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything, just that the musicians at certain points throughout the series are being judged, and on their ability to, even now I'm not sure necessarily, like part of it is their ability to replicate, part of it is their ability
he's referring to parts of kind of, you see the understanding of music that comes from the soul and music that comes from the book. And so there's different parts where these young people are being judged on the music, and even though they're able to play exceptionally well, you understand that there's another criteria for being judged and being able to replicate it verbatim. We won't get into what that means and the importance and so forth, but it was a very, very lovely anime.
Only an honorable mention for you, though.
Only an honorable mention just because, like, it's one of those things where it's kind of like Grave of the Fireflies, where it's like, I think it's great, but I wouldn't want to rewatch it because it'll make me cry. And it's also the fact where, about me, there's certain things about the show that hurt me in a certain way because of things that we don't need to get into, but it hurts me watching it because there's lots of things that I can relate to. But it's in my honorable mention because it's very, very, very good. Very good.
Absolutely. So now on to your number 6.
My number 6, which I've mentioned before in passing, I really, 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 really love it. I just, within the last few months, got Jeff to watch it so he can actually comment on it. And it would have to be Assassination Classroom. Both seasons. That's your number 5? Yeah, okay, that's my number 6. I truly love it. And like I said before in another podcast, not because we're teachers, but in the sense that I find the characters are very well written. The Koro sensei, the main fellow, the basic premise of the show is, without giving anything away again, is that we have a classroom full of students and we find out that something is planning to destroy the world, and this classroom is put to task to kill him by a certain amount of time, and if they do so, obviously they get to live and get reward, and if not, everyone just dies. And in that process of understanding how to get rid of this thing, I'll say thing because I don't want to give anything away, you kind of start to understand where these kids are coming from, how they found themselves in this classroom, why they're in the specific classroom, why they're separated from the other main school, what this thing really is, what his character is, how can I explain it? It's is such a great narrative on how we affect others and how we affect especially children and how they view the world and what we impart on wisdom to them, and kind of understanding other people's perspectives. I find that's really great, and how each person learns differently. And yeah, it was great. The music's great, the intros are great, the outros are really great. There's nothing I can really think of that's bad. Lots of funny moments, lots of sad moments, very clever writing. I found it hard to stop watching. I think I binge watched it within a couple days, all of it.
I was pretty much in the same boat.
Basically the same boat.
I was watching it. I finished it at about 2 a.m, and you had said from the other room.
I just started like Caterpillar kind of going into the other room, and I was like, "Are you there yet?" And of course, the ending is tear-worthy. I think for most people I talk to, it's sad because I won't get into why it's sad.
It's sad.
It's a journey, and you understand each person's journey along the way and what has brought them to this point in their life. And you kind of have a better understanding for putting yourself in other people's shoes and kind of getting that greater grasp. I just love everything about it. I love the jokes, they land. There's never a moment where I'm like, oh, that was really hard to, like, cringy. It was so funny. It, like, hit every kind of sense of humor for me. The dirty kind of jokes, the clever writing, kind of running on people's personalities and how they conflict and how they can actually work well together. I thought it was just delightful. The animation is very, I would say almost like, not like super detailed or complex. It's very simplistic, is what you'd see to most other anime. But I find that it's very, very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And there's even combat aspects that are really enjoyable and interesting to break down as well.
I think that it just, in us talking about it now, this is an anime that hits that perfect amount of...
For me. About pacing?
No, yes, it hits the pacing perfectly, whereas something like Natsume, it takes too long.
Yeah. And like I said, it's not for everybody, Natsume, so I totally understand that. Where this is for, I'd say, for most. Yeah. Because it keeps your interest. It lets you know that, which I'm sure we'll be talking about, if not I will be, My Hero Academia, where it lets you know that it promises you a lot of things and you know it'll follow up. And that's very reassuring for somebody who's like, I don't know if I should keep going, if I should go into the second season, if it'll still maintain quality. I can guarantee you it does. And... the pacing is just perfect because we get to have kind of our sad moments and our kind of frustrating moments, and it kind of goes across the spectrum of how you're feeling, and it just keeps your interest, and the jokes just land so well that it's hard not to be invested.
I mean, it has a nice built-in sort of arc because I mean there's one of two
arcs,
ways that it can end,
right?
Essentially. Unless they're going to throw you a massive curveball in the middle there. So even though lots of episodes are, especially in the first season, are all about specific students and why they're there, you always have that thread of, it's still moving forward. Like, that's another day or another week that is now gone.
Yeah.
But you
There's
now
definitely
understand...
a timeline.
Yeah, you now understand, why this character is here, why they're important or maybe not so important, and it moves the pacing along really, really well. So yeah, I had it as my number 5.
Okay, Yuri on Ice was my number 5. So
okay,
yeah.
So now I guess
do I talk about my number 4?
I guess so. Yeah, we're into this is
Woo!
we were talking before about the fact that we believe most of our top 4 will be almost the exact same. Maybe a couple of things flip, but...
So my number 4, which I'm sure to nobody is surprised, is My Hero Academia. Well, that's mine. I don't know about you. Mine.
It is... Here's the thing.
Oh.
I have it at... I also have it at number 4 right now. It almost assuredly will at least be number 3. Because it will, it will beat out my number 3. It just hasn't yet in terms of the anime.
Since I know I have subscribers on this channel who follow a lot of the videos religiously, believe me when I say that the arcs are just going to keep getting better and better and better, because I've mentioned several times before, I've read all the manga up until this point. Obviously, it's still ongoing, but as much as that's humanly possible to read right now, it's so bloody good. Like, I can't explain how good it is, and like how it just gets more like in the next few years. I'm just gonna see all these people just going ape shit over the next few arcs because they're so good and they're so meaningful. But anyways, talking about the now, because obviously I don't want to spoil anything. I saw, especially in the first season, I made a video about why you should be watching it, and the second season is paying twofold. Yeah, it doubles down. Where the first season, where I was like, you know what, I think this will be a big deal, and I started reading the manga, I'd say decently early to when I started watching it. So I started watching it, then obviously dipped into the manga, and then I started reading like a fiend. So for days I couldn't be found. Anywho, the first season you kind of get that slower pacing, but it's kind of understanding each of these characters and kind of the environment that we're in, because I think it wants to establish that it's taken inspiration from X-Men and other kind of comic book like kind of manifestations.
Yeah, well, it wears its influences on its sleeves.
Definitely. The creator has said before, like,
Western comics.
Yes, he has said many times, and you see it especially, like, it's happened a couple times you might have missed, but it's definitely in the manga as well, where different moves are like the Detroit Smash and things like they're very heavily inspired. But especially, I feel like it pays out on the first season, especially in the last, I believe, like 4 episodes or so. We have the stakes of, yes, you are kids, but you're dealing with villains. You're dealing with people who aren't afraid to kill you. This is the world you live in. You have to be prepared. If you want to be a hero, that's what it means. It means fighting these awful people. It means going up against them. And you start to understand in season 2 that it goes another step further and says, okay, you have to learn to work by yourself. You have to learn to work with others. And not just that, there are rules to being a hero. You can't just kick the crap out of whoever you want. You have to still follow the guidelines of the law. You still have to be able to do your job. You still have to go by this rating system, so to speak. And that's how, you know, depending where you are in the system and how well you're working, is how you get paid and so forth. There's different rules. But they're all rules that don't take away from the show, but build on the fact of what the potential will be. And a lot of characters are very, there's so many, but, and there gets to be more, because the creator is just so invested in the manga that he finds it hard to not stop making these characters. And I find that's okay, because I know a lot of people want character development, and we do get that for a chunk of characters, and some of them don't get it. A lot of it, anyways. I
mean, in terms of what shonen normally do, it does an exceptionally good job. Oh, no, totally.
But I mean, when we get class A and B, and we start understanding, like, some of them don't get their time to shine. Even in the later manga, I'm not going to say who does or doesn't, but a lot of them get their time to shine. And I know some people will complain about that, but I feel like, not like in any good show or movie or series.
You need supporting characters.
It's exactly. You need supporting characters, and they won't get their time in the limelight, so to speak, because they're there to support. They won't get that full development, really, unless I'm assuming we get to filler. And yes, we've already gotten to 1 episode of filler where we've gotten, basically it was going through some of what happened in their internship. It didn't show
that. Even the creator was involved and was like, if I had time when I was making the manga, this is what I would have done.
But that's the thing. The filler still works. It's what he would have done. He has his hands on everything. He's very involved in everything, My Hero Academia. He has a full set of, like, the people who do, like, I was reading an interview, and the guy who used to do the animation for Berserk is the one who's doing it, looking over basically the character designs for the anime. And he has all these people that he trusts because he wants it to be this vision that he already had. Like, the ending that we see of them kind of like on this like journey and adventure was something that was already pre-done in the manga. It was actually one of the color kind of art. I can't remember if it was the cover or just the inside kind of artwork, but that was something he'd already done because he loves the idea of playing with these characters and seeing what their potential will be. And it's just so good. I could just go on for hours, but do you want to say something?
I said it before in other podcasts, but if this is the first podcast that you're listening to, the main bane of my shonen existence is escalation, and the fact that that's the reason why Dragon Ball is better than Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball has a set of characters that are all still relevant by the time you get to the finale. It's the reason why, part of the reason I love Hunter x Hunter is characters that are kind of woven in and out of the main storyline are still relevant, they're still powerful, they still belong within the same classification.
Right.
That's something that My Hero Academia is doing very well.
Right.
First of all, they very expertly, it's really smart on his behalf, that writes in immediately kind of what the cutoff point of power is. Right. In the sense of there is a character who is by far, I mean, I guess maybe not by far, but in the minds of everyone else is by far the most powerful being that has ever existed on this planet.
Right.
And
I know who you're talking about, but we won't talk about it.
And I'm just saying is that you don't need to have further escalation than that.
Right.
Because
we know what the bar is, and now everyone has to meet that bar or try to get to a point where that can be matched, at least. And so
that escalation isn't going to be a problem. They've already done an exceptionally good job of making sure that, and it's one of the things that Sugar and I will debate somewhat ad nauseum about the show, is that there are different components to being a hero, and that they have a rating system of which heroes are the best and not, but each hero does a different thing and it's valued differently.
Right.
But it's also it makes sense.
Right.
It just to use some analogs in Western comics, you're not going to view somebody who is very good at one thing in the same way as you're going to view Superman.
Right.
Superman is great at nearly everything that he ever needed to be great at, whereas some character like it's a different universe, but Daredevil is good. Don't get me wrong, but he ain't no Superman. And so a lot of the characters that exist in Class A, they're not going to be Superman. They just won't. But
oh, you mean versus Class 1A and Class 1B? Or just in the class itself? Just
in the class itself.
Oh, okay.
But they're all being viewed like there are characters that are going to very much just be about search and rescue. That's going to be their bread and butter.
Right.
But they belong in 1A because they are excellent at that. There are characters who are exceptionally powerful who are not who are not going to progress within the system because they can't figure out how to be a hero.
And I love, there's so many things that the creator has thought about, and there's so many great stories that are yet to come. But even currently, I feel like it gives a great message to people, and especially kids, that even though you're different, your kind of different is exceptional at some place. Like, you're a specialist at something, and that's great to some job or to some skill. You aren't, terrible because of it. Obviously, there's somebody or something that will need this specific talent, and you will shine there. And I love that idea. And also, in the future, we see that... I won't get into it because I'll get really excited and then I'll say something I don't want to say. But anyways... It's wonderful. I can honestly say it's the first time in a long time I'm super excited about a shonen. Other than obviously Hunter x Hunter, but it's a different type of excitement. This almost feels like it's learned from its
predecessors.
Thank you. I was trying to say the word and I can't speak. It took all the things that people expected and kind of made it better or kind of turned it. Like right away, I said before in another podcast where people right away bitched about the tournament arc. But then it's like, we aren't doing what you think we're doing. We're going to show you this aspect of helping yourself, helping others, and not being like, this is the top, meet me there. You know what I mean? All these people are really skilled. And what happens at the tournament arc, I can't say it enough because I can't say anything else, is that it has huge repercussions on the future arcs. It has huge meaning. But again, I don't want to get into it because I don't want to spoil it for you, and I know how much spoilers suck sometimes. So we'll leave it at that, I think, for My Hero Academia. So that was my number 4. What was your number 4?
That was also my number 4.
Oh, yay.
It's sort of tied for number 3.
Ooh, what was number 3?
So your number 3 was Baccano.
Yeah.
My number 3 is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
That was my number 2.
Okay.
So, I don't know what you have as
my number 2 is Cowboy Bebop. We've already established that. So you have it at 2, I have it at 3. My Hero Academia will eclipse it, I think. But
there's huge promise of that being
this was
the case.
Definitely my until My Hero Academia showed up. This was definitely my pick for the best, fairly pure shonen ever created. You could argue that Cowboy Bebop might be a shonen, but it has a lot of different things going for it.
Yeah.
This is my number 1 favorite full blown shonen. It doesn't have the problems of escalation. Literally, the rules of the world are explained in the very first episode, and the only thing that eclipses those rules is this MacGuffin that they're spending the entire series trying to find that is supposed to simply amplify this ability. And that's it.
The first episode hits you hard and lets you know right away what you're in for. Because I remember the first time, honest to goodness, it was actually when I first started dating Jeff. And he was like, you have to watch this. And I was like, it was always something that people were like, you should watch it. And I just hadn't got around to it. And he showed me the first episode, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch it.
You were...
He's like, no,
I think you told me to turn it off.
Yeah, he's like, you'll love it. Because I'm not somebody who likes gore for gore's sake or anything like that. Like, Baccano is like a Tarantino movie for me. That's okay for gore. But gore for gore's sake, or just like demonic, really screwed up crap, like... Berserk was kind of the line for me. I don't do gore for gore's sake. So I was like, oh God, if this is the rest of it, I don't want to watch it. He was like, no, just trust me. And I'm so glad I followed through and watched both the original and Brotherhood. And I got to see where the improvements were and how things were, so to speak. But I find that it's a lot to love. The characters are very wonderful. You get to, like, so many people use it as examples. I'm sure even in university classes of, like, this is what your antagonist looks like. This is what your protagonist looks like. This is what, like, how you can invoke fear out of one person by doing simplistic movements and tone and voice acting. Like, holy shit, hockey mushrooms.
It has one of the greatest singular anti-heroes that has ever existed in
and
culture,
almost everybody references him because it's something that's done right. When you think of somebody who's an anti-hero or somebody who's a villain, when you think of all these things and right away you're like, well, it's Scar. You think of like what he is as a character, you're like, that is the definition of what you think of when you think of Scar. Like, and all the other characters have, like, obviously the temptation, so to speak, of gluttony and
the sins,
the rage and all that stuff. And like everybody I talk to, and even myself, one of my top 10 characters is Roy Mustang. And like his scene, which I'm sure everyone knows by this point, but we won't give it away, it's just so wonderful and it's so satisfying to see it. And I'm sure if I just say, like, if I snap my fingers, you'll know what I mean.
It does an excellent job. So, like, the villains are all named after, different sins. But then the anime does an exceptionally good job of showcasing regular people utilizing and falling victim to those same things.
Right.
That they show that foible in their character more so than the people who were created out of it.
As those, yeah.
And it says so much about race and racial disparity. It is definitely taking some liberties from our own human history.
Right.
It does do some
especially
World
the
War
military
II
aspect. I was just about to say, I love that.
And it's just it's the perfect shonen anime. It has not been eclipsed yet in my mind. That's the reason why I have it sort of tied, but I did list it above My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia will most likely surpass it.
That's the thing. That's like what most of my lists. I usually don't do ones that are incomplete, but My Hero Academia is so solid, and I've already read the manga. I know, it promises to pay out tenfold. Trust me.
It's learned from what something like what Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood did. It's one of the few anime that I can legitimately say are better in English than it is in the Japanese. I think the English dub is better.
Yeah.
It is absolutely expertly voice casted. It's very concentrated on the story that it's trying to tell, the characters that they're trying to that they're trying to kind of get you into. It does a very good job of showcasing that our main protagonists, while they are good, they're very good, they're not gods. They are not head and shoulders above everybody else around them, which is something that, again, Naruto falls victim to, which is that, you're either you're the son of this god or you're the son of this god.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z, the same problem. This doesn't have that problem at all. Where you could legitimately, if you were to have had a tournament arc that involved all these characters at the midway point of the anime, I don't know if any singular one would have eclipsed any of them. Like, they're not to say that they're necessarily so evenly matched, but they each have their own strengths that you definitely that
Each
just
one of
come
them has,
through so
strength,
well.
yeah. And that you're very clear of what their ability is, where some of them are very good at, obviously, their God-given gift of alchemy. Other ones are very good, like, just natural fighters. Other ones are good at, gunslinging, basically, and that's wonderful. And another thing I really appreciate about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is the fact that it knows when to pick its moments. It does sadness incredibly well. It does humor rather well. It does all these kind of different moments really well. There's no one point where it's just like, oh, that was really bad or that was cringy. It was very well paced, especially Brotherhood compared to the original.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could say like, oh, obviously the pacing is kind of, but Brotherhood, obviously they cleaned it up a bit, and it's number one for a reason in ranking. So many things we could talk all day and have a whole freaking essay about why it's good.
It's a 10. I have 4 series that have ever gotten a 10, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
It's a 10. There's a reason why it's...
10 out of 10.
I'm pretty sure it's ranked in the top 10 on my anime list.
It's number 1.
Oh, it's number 1. It's number 3 for me, and
number 2 for moi.
For Sugar, but
yeah. I almost
awesome.
said my real name.
I was gonna call you my pet name because I don't normally call you Sugar, but
call me Sugar Mama. I was kidding.
Sugar Mama. I went Johnny Bravo there for a second.
Oh Lordy.
Yeah, it's.
So I think we've moved on to our honorable mentions, haven't we?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I forgot about my honorable mentions.
So would you like me to start? Would you like to give us some of your ideas? I guess if it's something a little less known, kind of give us a synopsis of what it's about.
I mean, we'll go
abuse.
quick, I guess. For as much crap as I give Naruto, it's an honorable mention. They're
Even
very
with all the filler, I have to ask because I know somebody who's listening to this will say the same thing.
I actually give it to the original versus Shippuden.
Okay, Shippuden.
Shippuden's filler gets absolutely ridiculous. The original, before the time skip, like I said, everybody was fairly equal. The fact that beyond the filler, you end on an arc where it's like a group of the classmates go out together. It isn't Naruto's saving the world. No. Naruto needs the help of his other classmates to go off and do this.
Right.
It has exceptionally powerful scenes. It has some very good fight choreography for the most part. There are some times where it wavers a little bit. There are times, and this was more in Shippuden with one particular fight, which they go with a very different art style. I don't know why he's running like Sonic the Hedgehog And
they have different animation artist teams kind of coming in and out of there, so it's kind of...
It makes each fight unique, which is I really appreciate.
It makes it a little more unique, but it's a little jarring.
Sometimes it's like, that's kind of ugly. Quite frankly,
no, that's true.
It's kind of ugly.
I can think of especially with Pain. I'm not a huge fan of that animation, but
that animation was bad. That was the best fight in the entire series. I was about to say
the fight was great, but watching in that animation was.
So I give the original Naruto the props over Shippuden. I love the characters that they created. I love the story that they were going for. Mm-hmm. I loved the fact that even the more senior members like Kakashi and just everybody was fantastic. And it wasn't just about how great Naruto is. It was about this class. And that's part of the reason why I love My Hero Academia so much, is because it's about the class. The other 9 that I have on my list, and this comes with an asterisk because it's not the entire thing and it's not done yet. Digimon Adventure Tri.
Oh yeah, I can see where you get that. It's very much, can I say, Digimon for adults. In the sense that...
The original Digimon was made for an older audience. The version that we got was heavily edited.
No, I mean that in the sense of, like, Tri hits, like, a lot of topics that it's glazed over in the original series. And it's, like, it hits home hard, where it's like, this is the reality. It sucks, but you have to make that choice.
Tamers hits a lot of that point, too, that the 3rd season of Digimon. That hits a lot of those elements as well.
Digimon Tamers, wasn't that the 2nd, or is that Frontier? I get them mixed up. I've watched so many damn series.
No, it's the 3rd. The 3rd one, the 3rd season in particular, where it starts off with the kid who creates his own Digimon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that whole that series was excellent, but I just feel like Tri does that, but with characters that I care about more.
Yeah.
So I mean, part of that is nostalgia, but it's also the animation style is really good. Beyond. That's the reason why there's an asterisk. It continues to get better and stronger.
Obviously not done. Yeah,
Digimon Adventure Tri, like, episode 1 or movie 1.
And it's hard to say, because it's released in movies, but it's usually in sections of 4. Yeah. So a lot of people are like, well, I watched that episode / movie / whatever. So people get confused talking to one another.
So especially like part 3. We'll just say part 3, it killed me a little bit.
Yeah.
And just
it definitely made me cry.
The themes where it hit. And then 4 continued onward with the ramifications of what happened in 3.
Yeah.
Part 1, I felt stumbled a little bit. They got some of the characterizations wrong, or maybe not wrong,
wouldn't say
but
wrong.
They were jarring.
Yeah.
Some of the changes that they made to certain characters. It was a bit jarring.
It was definitely something we, as obviously having that nostalgia, wanted to revisit and get some of the closure that was left from the first gen. Because that's who we're dealing with again. Tai and the gang. It's not the other one so much. Well, in the second iteration, because we have like Kanichi Joji and them, we have kind of on the outskirts of things. But we won't get into that. But anyways.
It's part of the reason why it's an honorable mention, where it hits really hard in a number of good ways. They have excellent fights. They escalate what happened in the original 2 seasons quite well. So, I don't have a problem with that at all. So those would be the big 2, I guess, right off the bat that definitely deserve that mention.
Okay.
I would say that Restaurant to Another World might fit in there at some point as we see it kind of continue on. Just when we were getting to a point where I think you and I were like, okay, what's the point, and are we getting there?
Yeah.
They changed up the formula a little bit in the latest episode.
I don't think it'll be a 10 for us, and I'll explain later why, but I can understand why you would maybe hope that it would be.
It could potentially get there.
Yeah.
So those would be the big honorable mentions right now in terms of series. There are some other series that I have listed at a 9. I'm just kind of going through.
Well, if you want to keep looking through your list here, I can mention a couple that I have.
I was going to say Mobile Suit Gundam I have at a 9 as well. But it's been a long time since I've watched it. I don't know if it holds up as well.
I was about to say, try and pick something that's like, something you remember watching.
Oh, it was brilliant at the time when I watched it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I really... but I'm more politically minded sometimes than you are, and so the politics of it all were really, really intrigued me.
It's ironic because the picks that I have for honorable mention I think would be up your alley, but you haven't watched them. Anyways, the two I was going to mention for sure. I obviously mentioned that Your Lie in April was going to be in my honorable mentions, but Jeff nailed that. Two that I always recommend to people, and it seems to be kind of ones that have been under the radar and people haven't heard of, is first one is Eden of the East. And it's a very good series. How can I explain it? I know in the other podcast we kind of related it to the fact of being kind of like a Game of Thrones. It's dealing with like sci-fi, mystery, comedy, like thriller. You're on this kind of storyline of terrorism, and you can't really understand where it's coming from or why it happened. And you're dealing with characters that kind of have a mystery behind them. And behind this mystery, you realize there's a game being played. And in this game, there's a lot to gain and a lot to lose. And I find it's very suspenseful, and I really liked it. A lot of people I know haven't heard of it. Yeah, it's really, really good. Jeff hasn't watched it, which I feel is a shame. It has some violence and profanity, so it's rated at R17, I believe. But I find it's very, very good. Again, didn't make it in my top 10, but I found it very enjoyable. Very good characters, a lot of mystery and suspense that if you watch it the first time, you'll want to rewatch it because there's lots of things where you're like, okay, how did that happen? Why did that happen? What does this person have to do with X, Y, and Z? My next one, I would say, which I think, again, you'd like, but you haven't watched it yet, is Time of Eve. It's a story basically set in the future about how people are living with androids. And it's very sci-fi in the sense that, long story short, this guy and his family have an android, and he realizes one day that the android has been leaving somewhere, and you find out it's been to this cafe. And the cafe's rules are that you aren't allowed to ask people if they are or aren't an android, and you can't harass them. And a lot of the story goes on the idea of exploring what it means to be different, what it means to be an android, if it really does matter, knowing this classification, what if there's deeper feelings with these androids. And it's very good. I would say watch the movie because it encompasses all of the series and includes a more detailed ending, so you feel a little more satisfied watching it in its kind of collection. Yeah, this would be two I'd definitely recommend.
Another one, and I think we touched on it a tiny bit, but the more I think about it, the more I realize how much I enjoyed it all, is Shingeki no Bahamut.
Oh yes, Rage of Bahamut.
Yeah, Rage of Bahamut, the English name for it. I don't know how to really classify it and why it left such an impression on me, except for the fact that I enjoyed it. It was a little light. It was oddly enough, like with how heavy it gets at certain points, it still took a light approach to everything.
And there's so many things in it that I think for everybody there's something to appreciate, because like myself, I'm very much a history buff, and I really enjoy being like, oh, I know the angels, I know what they are, I know these gods, I know these people in history and lore, what this military aspect is. And for you, I can honestly say you're like, I really love these characters. They're very like lovable. There's people that are just like so complex and kind of misunderstood, but you still love them. And there's characters that we just kind of get a glimpse of, and we haven't watched the second season, but I've heard really great things still about the second season. The artwork is beautiful. Like, it's something you can't stop watching. It's gorgeous. I can honestly say that.
I like how it weaves different
lore and
mythology
and
together. And
like, yeah.
It's like they simultaneously don't give a crap, but then they actually like
excuse me,
really deeply do care to make sure that at least the personifications of the things that they're talking about are proper.
Yeah.
But then they're just like, well, no, the lore that we're having, it isn't just Christianity,
right?
Because they also have stuff from like Ragnarok and Norse mythology, and everything is kind of commingling, and it just becomes like,
It's like you have a master storyteller, and it's like you were trying to make this blanket, and you have all these threads, and they fell off the table, and you're like, I can still make this work. And so they're able to tell their story through other stories. And even though it's so creative, it's believable that could be canon, so to speak. Mm-hmm. It's very fantastical. It's very wonderful. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't ranked especially fantastically high.
Right.
That's the reason why it's an honorable mention.
Right.
I just feel like
it does have
it's
issues,
something...
but it's fun.
Yeah. And we blitzed through it, I think, in 2 days.
Yeah.
The main character reminds me so much of the best qualities of somebody like an Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
You know, he's there just because he happened to have been there, but then he does feel that push to just do the right thing, regardless of the fact that he's like a thief, bounty hunter type.
Yeah.
He's like
he has things to lose, but he's willing to take that risk to find something greater.
He's a Han Solo.
He's a cool character, Favreau. So now, our time for number 1.
Oh, I wonder what it is.
I'm pretty sure I know what it is, because mine... Do we say it at the same time and then be horribly traumatized when we are at the same...
I might just say it something different entirely. Just
no, that's mean.
1, 2, 3, Attack on Titan.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding.
Do not.
You have your series about everything that's wrong with it. Yeah.
No, I will go into depth of what I do and don't like. But anywho, Steins Gate.
Yes, absolutely. It's the
number 1, without a doubt. Boof.
I can't give an 11 out of 10 on my anime list. And honestly, I can't say that I necessarily would, because it took us twice to actually get to it. Because we tried.
I see what you mean, yeah.
We tried to watch it, and it just, I don't know if it was the mood that we were in or whatnot.
We were just in a funk, and it's like I said to people.
The first 3 episodes are purposefully jarring.
Yeah. And when you don't know what's about to happen, you see it and you're like, I don't understand what's going on, so I don't know if I should continue on. But the thing is...
You hit episode 4.
You hit episode 4. But the thing is, like, a lot of people have covered, and I know Digibro is one of those people, there's a lot. Like, if you pick apart the first episode, there's a lot there to promise that there'd be something good. It was just the fact of waiting that was, like, getting so, like, I don't want to say anxious, but, like, you're like, I know something good can happen. Will it deliver? And, of course, it did. If you don't know anything in the world about Steins Gate, which I find hard to believe for a lot of people because everyone kind of has been talking about it the last year or so, especially, Steins Gate is about a kind of a mad scientist, so to speak, working with his friend in his quote-unquote lab, which is kind of their apartment, and they are trying to work on new technological devices, and one of which is a time machine. And in this process of kind of trying to make things work, they run into other characters and how it affects their life and how they affect them. That's all I want to say in regards to spoilers. And that's not even a spoilers, that's just really the synopsis. The story is so well told, and it makes you feel so invested. Especially, I don't want to get into any details, but the more the story goes on, you just feel so attached to these characters, and you feel like this heart, like a couple of the moments, and there are some of my saddest moments, top 10, because it just hits you where you're like, if this had happened to me, I could feel this pain. I would understand this because there's somebody in my life that is like this. And like, it's such, the character, especially of Okabe, which is our main lead, is such like a charismatic kind of funky guy, and that you kind of are drawn to him right away because he's so out there. Quirky, I want to use the word, but it's kind of just so, just has a persona of his own that runs with his own personality, and it makes him very lovable because he's so goofy.
I would like part of me wants to liken him to, think of an exceptionally overly positive but not as brilliant Rick from Rick and Morty.
Oh, Rick and Morty? I was about to say that's kind of a stretch, especially in comparison to personalities, but I understand what you mean by somebody who's very intelligent and surrounds himself with other intelligent people, or tries to anyways, and he has that personality of kind of his own self versus the persona that he puts on it jokingly, kind of having that kind of scientist kind of lifestyle, and kind of having he always jokes about having people kind of like spying on him and such, and it's very like endearing. And whereas Rick is kind of like the very extreme of, he has his own personal self and then his scientific self, but he is very much more scarred and has issues and is very dark.
Yeah, like I said, and exceptionally positive.
Yeah.
You know, and to see the growth that happens throughout what happens throughout it, like you see a man become broken.
Yeah,
and
you find how
and
things
it
change.
feels so it's so real. Like,
it's so legitimate. The pacing is perfect for the moments that it wants you to feel like these certain like heaviness. Where especially, I'm gonna say it and you'll know what I mean right away, is the rooftop.
Oh yeah.
That scene is so heavy, and it's so like everything has a purpose, has a meaning. And I watched it a lot, and every time you rewatch it, everything just has more meaning, because you're like, I didn't see that initially. I understand how that plays into this now. And I'm not saying you have to rewatch it a billion times to enjoy it.
I feel like you have to watch the first 3 episodes over again after finishing the series.
Yes, I would definitely recommend that aspect.
They do a fairly good job of explaining it throughout the runtime of the series, and then into the subsequent information.
You appreciate it more after you understand the whole picture.
You appreciate how jarred you were. You were happy that the first 3 episodes, you're like, I don't know what this is about. I don't understand what's happening. I don't know if I want to continue.
And that's the best part, because the first 3 episodes, especially after you finish, when you initially see the first 3 episodes, you're like, this is so calm and kind of almost boring. And then after you get the whole story, you're like, this is a very tense situation. There's so much at stake in these 3 episodes. You know what I mean? And you see these small like nuances, and you're like, oh geez, like it's one of the few times where it's like the pacing is good, the story is really good, the science behind it makes like logical sense in the way of like explaining how things work. Like, I don't want to give anything away, so I'm trying to be like choosing my words carefully. Everything is really well explained in that sense. We kind of understand where each character is coming from. We understand where they want to go. We understand how they kind of weave into the picture of the story by the end, and where they lie. And I could hint at things, but I think you already know where I'm going. Where some characters that seem really insignificant aren't, and vice versa. It's really good. It's one of the, you've probably heard, reason why it's talked about a lot is the sub and dub are equally as good.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
Like, our wizard friend will say, the sub is much better. We prefer the dub.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason is because
have to read when
there's
I
a lot of there's a lot of information to take in, especially if you're like reading, papers and whatnot as you're trying to read the subtitles.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely
like
the first time through, I'd say have it dubbed, because then you get to take in the full picture.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I find that with some of them, not always, like especially if it's very first, like initial kind of just dipping into anime, you want to kind of get the full picture rather than trying to read, trying to look up at their expression, looking down, trying to read. Sometimes if you're a really quick reader, that's okay, but most people kind of have an average reading speed, so it's kind of like reading, looking up, reading, looking up, reading, looking up. Whereas like if you're just listening to it, there's so many critical moments where you're like, oh, that dug deep, that hurt me physically. And I watched it so many times. It's so, I don't use the word very much, but I can almost use it this way. It's perfect. Where I can't think of anything off the top of my head that it does wrong. Pacing good, story good, characters good, like OVAs ironically good. Like that's something you don't get a lot of. Where it's like usually the OVAs, it's like, oh, you want to cringe, but it still gives you more closure, which I didn't think was possible. And yeah,
it perfectly gives you closure, but yet you beg for more from these characters in this world and whatnot. It's ranked to number 5 on my anime list overall, number 7 in popularity, and that is for an anime that is the genre is sci-fi thriller. Like,
right.
how often
so
does that
well
happen
done.
with that style?
Right.
Because there is a heavy leaning towards shonen, even on my anime list of what normally gets put into the most popular light and what is rated highly. And I'm sure the same thing in Japan as well. So for something...
I won't get into that. Sorry, go ahead.
For something that has none of those elements, and it's very intelligent,
yes,
to be rated that high it's a monumental achievement.
And that's something I can honestly say. I won't point fingers or say names, but some people are like, oh, the regular anime viewer or new people to the anime genre will not like it because it's too smart for them. And I don't like when people say that, because I find that if something's done really well, people will appreciate it. You don't have to be like, well, I have a master's in engineering and science and whatever. It's just the fact that it's a good story. And I don't feel like people should talk down to others like that, because I feel like it's trying to turn people away from something just because you're like, oh, this is great. You obviously couldn't possibly understand how great it is unless you have X, Y, and Z on your belt. It's a good story. Everything about it is good. Period. So yeah, don't be afraid of it. Definitely watch it if you haven't. Yeah, it's really great. Keep your eyes peeled. Lots of signs and perfect imagery and symbolism, and it's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the only thing I could say, like the only sort of like, if how to phrase it, it is. In our estimation, it's perfectly paced. For people who don't necessarily appreciate a slow build, you might not get over that initial hump. And I mean, you were mentioning earlier about how when you watch the first episode, you should know by the end of the first episode whether or not it's going to be a quality anime or not. Some people are going to miss what is good about it. The fact that we had to try twice. Right. We had to be maybe in the right frame of mind to get it started or whatnot.
Definitely, I would say,
and
try and watch it.
Oddly enough, the first time we tried to watch it, it was subbed. So that might be
part of it. That might have been part of it, because I know it was
a lot of information to take in.
I can honestly say, I think it was during a time we were both really drained. We were both working full-time. We just gotten home. We're like, okay, let's watch it. We put it on subbed. And we're just kind of like, okay, what's the point? When do we get to it, sort of thing. We were very impatient, and we kind of just dropped it. And finally, when we had the chance to be like, okay, I've eaten. I don't have anything going on for a while. Let's commit to this, because I've heard really great things, and I know there's potential here, and I feel like it can pay off. So both of us sat down and watched it, and it was just stupendous.
Sublime.
Yes, and it's one of those things where even if it is a little slower in the beginning, it has such a wonderful payoff. I can tell you that for certain.
It has the greatest payoff of any anime I've ever watched.
And like anything, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it, but from our perspective, it's the top for us. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you listening and watching. I was made aware over basically, I think, the weekend that my channel was shared on Reddit. So I really appreciate anyone kind of listening or newcomers. If you have any comments about the channel, let us know. Or let me know. I guess it's my channel.
Yeah, the person
who initially... There's a misconception that my husband started the channel, but that's okay. I love my husband, and he's on the podcast, so...
I mean,
no harm, no foul.
I told Sugar that she should continue this because she's very passionate about about anime as an art form. So I was like, I'll
keep on.
Get more involved.
So,
start a channel. Let's chat about it.
Yepers. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time, maybe for another podcast or maybe another video that I've analytically just broken down, because that's my forte. So anyways, have a great night, and we'll see you later.